With us today, we have Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's here at the European University Institute to deliver an Ursula Hirschman lecture. Justice Bader Ginsburg sits on the US Supreme Court, and she is one of only 2 women to have ever done so. We'll be discussing women's rights in Europe and America. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, thank you for talking to me today. So, reflecting on your long career challenging gender discrimination, how far do you think we've come today in tearing down barriers against women?
A long way. There's still a long way to go. But what has come down is what I call the separate spheres arrangement of the laws and people's thinking. That is, in the words of a Mozart opera, that's the way women are. And so it is a nursery rhyme. What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice and everything nice. Little boys, snails and tails and
puppy dog's tails.
Yeah, yes. Snails and nails and puppy dog's tails, yes. So that notion that girls, women are this way, boys, men are that way. The notion, the effort was to let people do whatever their God-given talent enabled them to do, and not have any artificial barriers, man-made barriers, stopping them from aspiring and achieving.
But so what challenges do you think remain today? And in that respect, do you think there are any significant differences between the situation of women in the US and in Europe?
Well, what is gone for the most part are the explicit stop signs. That is, women can't go here, they can't become police officers, they can't become airline pilots. Those explicit barriers are gone. What remains, 2 problems. One is what I call unconscious bias. And I can illustrate that best by referring to the symphony orchestra. When I was growing up, I never saw a woman in a symphony orchestra. Then someone had the bright idea, let's drop a curtain between the person who's auditioning and the judges. There was a critic for the New York Times, very famous critic named Harold Schoenberg. He said, put a blindfold on me and I can tell if it's a woman playing the piano or a man. They put him to the test, and he was entirely confused. He got it all wrong. And he was the first to admit that it wasn't that there was a real difference between a woman's playing and a man's playing, but it was his expectation when he saw a woman that she would be this way. So when they used the curtain for people who are auditioning for symphony orchestra jobs, almost overnight, women began to show up in numbers in symphony orchestras. I was telling this story some years ago, and a young violinist corrected me. She said, you left out one important thing. Yes, what did I leave out? You left out that we interview shoeless, so they won't hear a woman's heels coming on the stage. But that can't be duplicated in every area. I wish it could. I wish you could drop a curtain between the interviewer and the interviewee. But that problem of unconscious bias, another illustration. There was a case brought in the United States under our principle anti-discrimination in employment law. We call it Title VII. Women were complaining that they were disproportionately turned down for promotion to middle management jobs at AT&T. They did fine on all the standard measures until the last one. And the last one was what they called a total person test. It consisted of the interviewer, who was in those days always a man, and the interviewee. That's when women dropped out disproportionately. It wasn't that the interviewer was intentionally discriminatory. It's just faced with someone who looks like him, another man, he felt comfortable. If the interviewee was a member of a minority group or a woman, that was something strange. It made him uneasy. He wasn't consciously discriminating, but it's getting rid of that unconscious barriers. And I think the more women are entering into fields that were once reserved for men, the more women out there doing things, the better off we will all be.
Okay, but on that point, I mean, undoubtedly, feminism and, there are far more opportunities open to women now, but are these not confined to white middle-class women primarily? Is feminism, are the gains of feminism primarily white and middle-class, ultimately?
One big difference between the experience in Europe and the United States is in Europe it has always been gender, not minorities. In the United States, anti-discrimination law began with race. So the laws were set up to assure that African Americans were not denied opportunities. Women were made part of our famous Title VII law. They got into the law as a result of an amendment suggested by a member of Congress from Virginia. This was a man who wanted to defeat the entire law. And his notion was, if we add women, people will realize this is ridiculous and the whole law will fail. Well, it didn't. What happened was that the race cases helped the gender cases. I'll give you an example of the first Title VII gender discrimination case to be brought to the Supreme Court. It was Ida Phillips against Martin Marietta Company. The company had a rule: we won't hire mothers of preschool children. That case was taken up by the NAACP. The plaintiff was a white woman, but the NAACP realized that striking down that kind of restriction would be enormously beneficial to African American women in the job market. So I'd say breaking down the traditional separate jobs for men and women has been very helpful to all women. Take women in policing, or women as prison guards. The first year, when I was a judge on a court of appeals, I took my law clerks every year to the penitentiary and the jail. And at first, there were only men as guards. Then they began to hire women. The warden of the prison said to me, these women are really good. They work hard, they show up, they have a much better show-up rate than the men, less absenteeism. Then about 5 years later, I said, so how are the women doing? He said, they're just as bad as the men. Because by that time, they were there in numbers. So my answer is that having a law banning race discrimination and gender discrimination is helpful to both groups.
But if we look at where feminism began, it was a highly radical, highly countercultural movement. And now, of course, as you say, women have been co-opted or been incorporated into the system. So do you think that feminism, therefore, still has the potential to make a very radical social critique, or to look towards a kind of an emancipatory vision of what society should look like?
Yes, I think it holds the most hope for the world. If countries allow women to do, as I said, whatever their God-given talent enables them to do, I think we will all be better off for it if women can contribute to...
But does that require a very fundamental restructuring of our system? Can feminism still make that radical critique?
It won't happen overnight, but I can see even in the different generations in my own family. It used to be that women shouldn't work once they're married. The next step was, it's good to have 2 incomes in a family if you want to do well for your children. But she has to do all the woman-y things. She has to take the children for their medical and dental checkups, buy the new shoes, have dinner on the table at 7. Well, some women saw something wrong with that arrangement. And their complaint was he should share in raising the children, taking care of the household. He should do more than take out the garbage. At the same time, some men realized when their children were grown that they had very little part in raising them, and they came to regret that. So I see in my own children and in the children of the law clerks who work for me that the men are doing much more in the way of childcare than they once did. I received an application for a law clerk post from a man who explained he was going to law school at night because his wife was an economist with a very good job at the World Bank. And so he was the primary caretaker of their children. The possibilities today of being able to work from home are much larger than they once were. Employers haven't quite adjusted to a world where you can have flexible hours and still do as much as if you were on the premises. You can do it from your laptop at home. So I think that the direction of change is right. Its progress is slower than one might wish it would be, but as I said, the direction is right.
And so what would your message to young women or young feminists today be?
At first, that appreciate that no doors are closed to you if you have the talent and the will to aspire and achieve. And the other would be, remember the women who are less fortunate than you. Don't be satisfied, for example, that you, a woman with a good income, knows that she can have access to an abortion if she wants one, when poor women are not in that situation. You should be fighting to establish rights for everyone, not just for people who can pay.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to talk to you.